What's the real constitutional crisis? Constitutional crisis is the latest cry from the swamp seeking to panic Americans into opposing the president they just overwhelmingly elected. What the swamp is really howling about is President Trump's efforts to cut and control the swamp itself by exposing and stopping the rampant fraud, waste, and abuse perpetrated by the sprawling American federal government. The total amount of this fraud, waste, and abuse has been officially estimated by the Government Accountability Office to exceed $500 billion a year, including things like $22 billion from the Department of Health and Human Services to provide free housing and transportation for illegal aliens, or $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City alone, or $8 million for making mice transgender. What we see big picture is that government departments and agencies that were created for very noble-sounding purposes have expanded exponentially beyond what any taxpayer could have imagined and have become effectively slush funds for pumping billions of taxpayer dollars to promote agendas that are not only globalist and anti-American, but also immoral and anti-Christian. Clearly, there is a constitutional crisis in America, but what is it? According to the progressive movement, which produced the swamp, any effort to reduce or reform the swamp is a constitutional crisis. But according to the vision of the founders who framed the Constitution, the swamp itself is a constitutional crisis. Most modern Americans view progressivism as just one flavor of the American mainstream, but that is not true constitutionally and historically speaking. The progressive movement, which began way back in the 1880s and quickly infiltrated both national political parties, was the first movement in American history to openly oppose the Constitution and its vision of society expressed in the preface to the Declaration of Independence. You remember the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it." Progressives hated those words, and they hated the Constitution for creating a government designed to fulfill them. You see, as long as the founding documents were faithfully interpreted and applied, the progressive vision of a government-controlled society was dead. Thus, the vision of the founders and the vision of the progressives were diametrically opposed. On the one hand, the founders believed fundamental rights come from God and serve as strict limitations on government power. On the other hand, progressives believe that government power is unlimited and that rights are really just privileges granted at the discretion of the government. Whereas the founders believe that man is corrupt and his corruption goes up in proportion to his power, progressives believe that man is being perfected through evolution and that his ultimate perfection will be the all-encompassing, all-controlling state. Whereas the founders were significantly influenced by the Christian faith, which they considered essential for sustaining a citizenry capable of maintaining liberty and limited government, the progressives were significantly influenced by a different faith, the utopian evolutionary faith of Friedrich Hegel, who believed that the all-encompassing state was the divine idea as it exists on earth, and that history is moving inexorably to that end. Whereas the founders were dead set against democracy, believing it to be a sure path to tyranny, progressives were all about democracy, believing it to be a sure path to their ideal controlled society. You see, for progressives, the people does not mean actual persons, but the collective people. It's an abstract concept whose will must be determined by the ruling elite. This is why Woodrow Wilson said that democracy and socialism are virtually the same. On the other hand, representing the founders' vision, we have John Adams, who observed that democracy always moves quickly to despotism. And as an example, he pointed to the French Revolution, which had just occurred prior to the Constitutional Convention in the United States. He pointed out how the French Revolution promised democracy, but quickly moved to the bloody dictatorship of Robespierre and then ultimately to the Emperor Napoleon. Whereas the founders sought to enshrine timeless principles of good government in the Constitution and for it to function as the supreme law of the land, the progressives treated the Constitution as a living document that should be constantly reinterpreted to suit the so-called needs of the day. And this way, progressives have been very successful at transforming the Constitution from a lion to a lap kitty. Whereas the founders assigned the lawmaking powers and the enforcement powers of the government to two different branches, both being fully accountable to the people, to the states, or both, progressives envisioned a government consisting primarily of unelected so-called expert administrators, think Anthony Fauci, who are free to impose rules and regulations nationwide, and most of whom are permanent employees who are shielded from accountability, which is exactly what we find in the swamp. In short, our modern American government looks very much like the sprawling, unaccountable government envisioned by the progressives, and nothing like the limited government the founders created in the constitutions. So Trump's efforts to cut and control the swamp are not a constitutional crisis, but rather an attempt to lessen the progressive constitutional crisis that has been underway for well over a century now. Any progress Trump can make will be a move toward the Constitution, toward freedom, and toward sanity. Three things that we as Christians ought to support.